Hi, I'm Elma Crystal and this is The New Mind. Today's guest is Sarah Law. Now, Sarah, I found actually on TikTok, and we spoke earlier about the power of social media. You never know who's watching, and I was going through TikTok and I saw Sarah's work and I was just immediately drawn to her and I really wanted her on the podcast, and thankfully she said yes, so here she is. She is a retreat host and educator. She's a nutritional therapist and she's a women's wellness expert. So today you're going to learn a lot about women's health, and it's open to everybody, even the men who might not think this is interesting. You're going to learn a lot about women, their wives, their sisters, their girlfriends, all that sort of stuff. We'll be covering so much microbiome, menopause, general women's health, but also some of Sarah's story and why she's doing what she's doing. And fundamentally, that's the important bit, because I think a lot of you are going to connect to elements of Sarah's story, and I think that's the biggest, that's what we need. We need to connect, and we need that human connection more now than ever. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Me too, especially after talking to you a little bit before we started to record, because I didn't want to know too much, and I still don't know everything, obviously, but what I knew is that you had this really energetic thing going on. Like I say, I saw you on TikTok.
Wonderful,
And I really
wonderful
resonated. Yeah, it is. And actually, with all social media, you can use it in the right way or you can use it in the wrong way.
Absolutely.
And you're definitely using it in the right way.
Good.
And it grabbed my attention straight away.
Amazing.
So talk to me a little bit about, so I mentioned there you do these retreats. So you've just come back from Ibiza.
I have, yeah. I've been in the sunshine for a good week or so and back to the glorious British rain.
Very cold, very grey.
Very cold.
And essentially, this is a place where women can go and it's a safe space, but you used this word earlier and you said it's basically a place to surrender.
Yes,
Tell
absolutely.
me a bit about that.
Yeah, so we run the retreat once a year. It's called the Longevity Retreat, and I run it with my friend who's an NLP coach. She's a Reiki practitioner and a hypnotherapist. So she does a lot of the mindset work and I do the kind of physical body work. And really what we wanted the retreat to be was a place where women could come and feel safe, because I think there's so much outside noise, and when people, particularly women, we're very good at looking after everyone and holding everything together for everybody else, and actually not taking that time for ourselves to actually have an outlet to work on ourselves properly and let go of a lot of stuff. And so we wanted it to be a place where people could come, they could feel safe, they could learn about their body. And I always use the analogy of an iPhone. So I'm that person that will, get a new iPhone, I'll get it out of the box and I'll just switch it on and I'll think, oh, I know exactly what I'm doing with this. My husband is the complete opposite. He will get an iPhone, he'll Google everything, he'll research everything, and then he can do all these wonderful things with it. And I'm like, how can you do that? And he's like, yeah, because I read the instructions and you didn't. And I always say our bodies are the same. The more we learn about how our bodies function, the more likely we are to take better care of them, because we understand how miraculous they are. But also we know what to do with them. We understand them. And so that means we can do the right things for our bodies. So I wanted it to be a place where people could come, they could learn. And I always assume that people just live like I do and they know what I know. I forget that people often don't. They've not been given that education. So it was a real educational process, but a chance for them to kind of peel back the layers of the onion as well and start to open up parts of themselves that they don't know are there, or find the things that are the layers that are holding them back in life and stopping them being where they want to be. Because some of those women, knew the things they should be doing for their health, but they're not doing them. And it was a chance for them to sit there and go, but why am I not doing those things? And then giving them the tools to be able to walk away with things that can make a big impact for the rest of their lives.
Very good point, because yes, some people really don't know.
No.
But then many of us know exactly what we're supposed to be doing and we're not doing them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I won't go too much into that because that's private for what happens in that space. But we did say earlier there were some people there that the type A, that sort of very corporate, high stress, in survival mode, undoubtedly, that were having these realizations and surrendering to the process, letting go. And we mentioned, didn't we, that it's really hard to do that day to day because there's so much going on all of the time for so many people.
Yeah.
So this retreat, you said this earlier, and I like this because I use this a lot when I do my hypnotherapy sessions, the protective bubble. This is a safe space.
Yeah.
You said that earlier as well. And this is where you're going to get the time. And what I liked about it was that you also said earlier, and we'll talk about it again here, about being present. You weren't going to give them too much of an itinerary because you wanted them to be in the moment with each thing that was happening and be there rather than think about the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to plan. And I think this is the thing in the day and age that we live in, when you are someone who, you know, has a high flying career and you've got a family that you're looking after, it's like you always have to be structured, organized, knowing what you're doing, looking after everyone, getting everything sorted. And we were like, we want this to be a time that you put you first, where you don't have to plan everything. We're the ones planning it for you. You let go, you trust in us, trust that what we've put together is right for you, and then just show up. And it was so nice to see, you know, people who were so used to being the organizer, the leader, the person who does everything, just surrendering to that and going, oh, this is nice to actually be taken care of, to be the one that can just take a step back and let other people do things for me. And it was so nice because at the end of the retreat, one of the ladies, her family were over in Ibiza. And she was like, normally I'd be the one going, right, I need to plan where we're going for dinner and I'm going to organize everything. And she was like, I'm not going to. I'm going to let them plan it all. I'm going to give them a suggestion of where I'd like to go. But I'm going to be like, I'm not organising it. You tell us where you'd like to go. Let's go for dinner.
Wow.
And it was so nice to see her just go, oh, that feels so good to not be the person that's doing everything and organising everything and feeling like everything's on my shoulders. So, yeah.
Why did you want to create that space in the first place?
Probably from experience myself of being that person. I am quite type A. I think I'm quite a control freak, or I have been recovering, and feeling like I always need to be in control of things. And through my own kind of personal journey, realising that actually the best things happen when I surrender and let go, and seeing so many women in that same place of feeling like they have to cling on and hold on to everything to keep it all together. And actually when they start to do that, they start to have nervous system dysregulation, they start to have hormonal issues, stress management goes out the window and their health suffers. So seeing people get to a place of that surrender, and surrender doesn't mean giving up on things or not doing things. And this was the thing for me, one of the biggest lessons. You know, I used to think surrendering meant I'd be a really lazy human and I'd never get anything done. But what I realized was surrender didn't mean giving up on everything. It just meant doing it from a really different energetic space where I was calm and in a place of faith and trust that what I was doing was enough. And I didn't need to try and cling on to everything and control every part of it. I could just trust that where I was meant to be was where I was, and that one step at a time was all that I needed to focus on. So having those women there for me is like my way of being able to pass that part of my journey on to other people and make an impact in helping them see that the way that they're living probably isn't conducive to their health, and not how humans are actually meant to live, and giving them that perspective of taking a step back sometimes to be able to move forward.
What you've just said there is really interesting because you're trying to give those women something. And I think after understanding a little bit more about your background, understanding why you want to do that for women in particular is going to be key to this journey, because I suppose a lot of people help other people or educate other people or give something back. And as I said to you earlier, where there's someone who's very transformative in their approach, there's also somebody that's had to transform. So they've had to change something and they've had a reason for doing it. And to just caveat that, I know that you were a professional bikini competitor as well. So, you know, you were transforming your body, and really you mentioned their nervous system dysregulation. You'd had that experience and you'd been in control and you'd learnt that somewhere along the line. So in order to understand why it was so important for you to be able to give this gift to other women, I'd really love to understand the earlier years for you and how we've become this beautiful human being that you are today in every single way. So I normally go as far back as you're comfortable to go back, really, or as far back as is necessary for the story to begin. So what's your kind of first memories of being a little girl, and really, you know, some girls are tomboys or some girls are definitely more with the Barbie dolls and, you know, they're not outside playing all the time, they're more introvert. What were you like as a little girl?
It's definitely the tomboy. I grew up with two brothers and used to hang out with all of their friends. So it was me and all the boys most of the time, playing with the micro machine cars and Castle Grayskull rather than the Barbie dolls.
To be fair, they were good. I mean,
they were great.
He-Man was amazing.
Oh, He-Man was legend. And I was quite an interesting child, should I say. I was very, like, I didn't have fear around people as such. I was quite like a bold child and bold in lots of ways of like, I would throw myself off, walls and do backflips, and I wanted to be a gymnast. And I was a very like doer child. I've always been a doer, I would say. But I was also a thinker. And if I think back to when I was tiny, it was like I would think a lot about situations that hadn't yet happened, that kind of fear-based
sort of
what
prediction.
if. Yeah, a lot of what if this happens and what if that happens. And then I would try and plan for those scenarios, the worst case scenarios. What if this happened? Then if I did this, this and this, then that might not happen. So it was like that would be the constant going through my head a lot of the time. And it's so interesting when you start to look back at those and you're like, why was I that way? Is it that I was genetically pre-programmed to be like that? Was it that, when I was in my mum's womb, she was in a stressed state, and that led me to being this kind of heightened state of nervous system dysregulation and overthinking, and I guess in a way anxiety as to what could be. And I would always want to know why things had happened as well. So like I mentioned to you, the film Gorillas in the Mist, if anyone is from like the 80s, you'll remember this film, 70s, 80s. And the gorilla called Digit, they chopped his hands off. And I remember watching that film and just not being able to get my head around why it happened. And I would go up to my mum countless times a day and just be like, but why did they do that? Why did they chop his hands off? And she'd have to keep explaining to me. And it was like, it would just go round and round in my brain.
Because it made no sense at that time. You couldn't make the bits join together.
No, exactly. So I would say I was a very interesting child of like being bold and courageous, but also having a lot of fear and anxiety at the same time that wouldn't necessarily come across to people who didn't know that, who couldn't see into my brain.
Because you were good at masking it.
Yeah. I probably was really good at masking it without even realising I was doing it.
Yeah. Which suggests you learnt that from somewhere.
Yeah.
Because but also you mentioned there about the womb, and it's very holistic why a child is the way they are. It's what they experience. But epigenetics and ancestral DNA and everything, it shows that we can hold, I think it's 7 generations worth of trauma.
Yeah.
And they're even saying 14 now, 14 new data out. So there's like 1 trillion different reasons why. But we do know that there are key things as well. Like I mentioned earlier, you're really interested in the menopause and helping women through that. So give me a bit of an insight to your first experience of menopause as a child.
Yeah. So I witnessed my mum go through the menopause very early at the age of 32. So I was very, very young at that age. And my mum has always been, she's my biggest hero. She's amazing. She's always been, a very strong character, very strong, very courageous, very centered. And, I watched her go through that experience, and she had a really tough time.
How old was she?
So she was 32.
Really young then.
Very, very young. And she, went to mainstream medicine, and I believe was failed, in the way I saw it at that age. So she was put onto HRT at that point, but it was the old style HRT, which came from horse's urine. I mean, whoever thought that was a good idea? And I watched her, really turn into someone that she wasn't. She lost a lot of her hair. She then had terrible eczema, all these strange things going on, and lost so much confidence. And that was my mum. But what I witnessed was her become her own health advocate. And that was the biggest kind of inspiring part of the whole journey, really. She was the woman that researched everything, read every book, went to every holistic shop. She used to take me to this shop called Culpeppers, which had all these different herbs. And I remember at the time just being like, oh, this is so boring. Don't want to drag me around this shop again. But now looking back, it was such a catalyst to me being who I am today and learning everything I've learnt. And she fought, with the mainstream medical system to be prescribed bioidentical progesterone cream. And at the time, that was unheard of. Back then, no one knew what that was. It wasn't patented, so they couldn't make money from it. But she fought nail and tooth to get it, and she did.
Wow.
And just looking back at that now, and I'm like, I didn't realise at the time what impact that actually had on my journey to who I am now, and why I've got such a passion for helping other women.
Look at you now. This is what I mean. This is why I wanted to bring this up. Because you are now that little girl who's watching all of this and probably not really understanding any of it at the time, and not knowing all of it at the time either. But now you're that cycle of paying it forward.
Exactly.
It's really, I think that's brilliant. I really do, because there's a lot, when I think mothers in particular that have children, daughters, if you're going through the menopause now or perimenopause and you feel like you're losing your mind, remember the kids are watching. So, it's not necessarily like behave yourself. I don't mean it like that.
No, in a way of like you your journey could inspire them
Correct.
if you use your journey as something to help inspire them.
Yeah, and it's always seeing, you mentioned the surrendering and the letting go, but I think even in the pain, it's seeing the value while you're going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all there for a reason. And I think that's the hard and challenging thing for women going through menopause. It's like, why me? Why is this happening to me? Why am I a woman? Like, can't I just be a man?
Why am I a woman? I love it.
Just let me be a dog or something. But it is, recognizing that actually going through this is a time to learn, and it's a time to understand more about your body than you ever have, and learn how to make you a priority again.
Yeah.
Because so many women don't. They put everyone else first, and it's the kids, it's the family, it's everybody. They're last. And I say to my clients all the time, make this the opportunity. Maybe menopause is there for a reason. It's there to make you take care of yourself for once.
Yeah. It's so, and as a little girl then, because that's so true, by the way, but again, you're creating that narrative now. The narrative for your mum would not have been there.
No.
She wouldn't have had the role models, the books that we've got now, like Davina McCall's obviously done a lot of work in this space, and all the TV programs and YouTube and TikTok. She just would not have had that.
No.
And so you're part of this new narrative. But the little girl watching it at the time, did that contribute to any of your own, not necessarily your mum's issues, but just the lack of support for women at the time, the lack of, I guess, insight that she would have had? She'd had to really find it. So it would have, for a while, and I know this going through perimenopause myself, it does change you for a while. You grieve, actually. You grieve who you were, and you understand that nothing can ever be the same again. And it's that pivotal moment, I think, where you realise you can never go back. So everything is about now. We understand that so much more. But at the time, it would have been very hard for her. Do you think that impacted you as the way you saw yourself, or other things perhaps at the time?
It probably did. Yeah, I would say so, because it's so hard to understand at that age what someone's going through. And all I wanted to see was my mum happy, and I couldn't control that. I could do all I could, but I couldn't control what was going on for her. I could just support in the best way I could. But as a small child, you don't even know how to do that for your parents sometimes, do you? So I'm sure that, there are parts of that led me to maybe having more controlling tendencies and being that type A personality, which has served me in so many ways. It's led me to being able to do some amazing things with my life that I wouldn't have done if not. But having that kind of controlling attitude can sometimes be detrimental if you don't channel it in the right way. So I actually ended up with an eating disorder in my teens, which, at the time I would have put down to, it was body image and self-worth, which, yes, there's absolutely a component of self-worth to it. It started that I was going on holiday with one of my best friends, and she weighed half a stone less than me because I'd always been athletic, so I had a lot of muscle. And I was like, well, I need to weigh half a stone less. Obviously, at that time, I had no idea about nutrition. So I was like, well, I'll just not eat. So that's basically what I did, was just stop eating, lost a lot of weight, not in a healthy way at all. And then did the opposite and rebounded, ate the world, because obviously my body was like, you need food. So I'd restricted so much that I then ended up binging, couldn't stop the binging process, and then ended up very much bigger than I was, very unhappy in who I was. Guilt, shame, all of those feelings that come with that, because it was like I was so out of control. And then it would be like I would ping pong between the two, of being so in control and then being so out of control, and then in control and out of control. And that went on for quite some time, and then ended up going back into the over controlling, where I had kind of a very restrictive diet, was very much orthorexic. And that's when I was training to be a professional dancer as well. So in that environment, probably amplified it. And ended up quite ill, having to have cognitive behavioural therapy to really help me rationalise the way I thought about food, because it was so extreme. And I just had this, again, fear, came back down to fear. I had this huge amount of fear that I would go from being tiny like I was, eating like I was, to completely losing control, and then ending up 20 stone heavier within a day. It was like the thoughts were so irrational. So I needed help kind of rationalising my own thoughts, but it was still there. That element of control was... where all of that really was leading to, and this fear, I think, that had been underlying probably since I was a child, that I was then trying to control that feeling of fear. How can I control this fear? Okay, well, food and restricting and making sure I'm safe with what I eat is my way of dealing with that.
It's interesting you said the word safe, because it's safety that underpins all of this, isn't it? It's not feeling safe in the first place. So For the listeners that may have had their own eating disorders, I'll probably just layer in a few bits here. If you feel unsafe, and that trigger of my friend weighs half a stone less, I don't feel safe now. And that's not a conscious thought, it's a nervous system response.
Yeah.
That leads to a thought of what can I do now to feel balanced, safe. It becomes maladaptive, obviously, not eating. I'll get to that goal. Great. I'll feel safe again. I'll feel balanced again. And then you mentioned the guilt and shame there. And guilt and shame only exists if we've learnt that from somewhere. And I'm just wondering whether your mum was treated a certain way by the medical. I mean, when I went to the GP, and I started understanding I was going through what I thought at the time was perimenopause, and it is. They were like, no, it's impossible. Yeah, just do this and this and this and go away, basically. And so I did feel a bit like, oh, I've wasted their time and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel so out of control. And, you know, there's a level of shame of putting weight on when you're not doing anything different, or being more tired, more agitated because you're more snappy. And so that comes from that experience. And I just wonder whether you learn guilt and shame because your mum was going through so much and not being heard. That perhaps she was behaving in a way that she was also ashamed of. Even if she wasn't vocalizing at the time, because it's all energy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine, you know, it must have been such a challenging time for her having young children. You know, she was
30 something, 32.
Exactly, 32, young children, and not feeling like herself, and whether she felt, I don't know, incapable. And she wasn't. She was an incredible mum, you know. We had so much as children. But the feelings she probably had were, you know,
I'm not enough.
Yeah, absolutely, because she couldn't feel like she probably wanted to feel.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering whether, you know, all children, well, I'm not wondering, I'm pretty sure that all children will pick up on that, and that's how, because children don't listen, they watch.
Yeah.
So we learn who we are through what we see, and and that's where, you know, the system is accountable. Because women still struggle to be heard.
Absolutely.
Which is why it's so important with what you're doing. That's what I mean about being part of a new narrative. And I mean, how proud would your mum be seeing you work in that space around with women this age that are going through these things. But it's just so interesting that the control element, I can't control how my mum is feeling. I can't control how my nervous system responds to that. And like we said, it could be ancestral stuff, could be stuff in the womb. Holistically, there's a whole host of things, but I can't control it. And I feel ashamed that I'm not the same as this girl. So I'm going to restrict, and then I'm going to feel good, and then I'm going to binge, and then I'm going to feel bad. And the addiction, because eating disorders are a form of OCD and perfectionism and addiction. They're not really about the food.
No, even if people think they are. And I thought that for a long time. I was like, it's all about my body image. I have to look a certain way. And I'm like, but why do I have to look a certain way?
That's just the intrusive thought.
Yeah, exactly. It comes back to that addiction, trying to run away from the feeling of fear, trying to control situations that I didn't feel in control of. And then that leads to those long-term feelings and thoughts and actions, essentially.
What was the hardest bit for you in terms of once, I guess, I don't know if this is a thing for you, it has been for me historically with eating, once you realise, oh God, this is really not healthy, I'm out of control now. What was that like for you, and how did you manage even if you couldn't articulate it, knowing that it was out of control?
Oh, good question. So in the kind of first instance, I would say when I was at dance college, and I'd in my first year at dance college, I injured my knee. I snapped all the ligaments in my knee in a dance class, really fun, metal pins and all.
Oh my God.
So I had to have a year out. And in that year, I vowed to myself that I would not go back to college unless I'd lost weight, because I'd put on a lot of weight. And the interesting thing in that is college never said to me, you're overweight, you're never going to get a job because you're overweight. In my head, that was the opposite of, or it did the opposite of what it should have done. I was like, they don't care. They don't think I'm good enough. That's why no one's saying anything. I can see I'm overweight. Why are they not saying anything? So it was like, they don't believe in me enough to say anything. I'm not worthy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That shows how maladaptive that is.
Absolutely.
They weren't saying anything, but you saw that as them not seeing it.
Yeah.
And if they don't see it, I'm not
enough.
Worthy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy, isn't it? What our brains can do.
I know.
So in that year, I was like, that's it. You are losing weight, or you're not going back to college. That's it. Career over before you've even begun. So that's kind of when I went into being very restrictive, knowing the calories of everything. And then I lost weight. And then when I went back to college and everyone was praising me, like, you look amazing, you look amazing. And that's when the fear kicked in, because I was like, well, if I change anything,
then I won't look amazing.
exactly, I'm going to end up where I was before. So stay where you are. And then I just kept losing weight and losing weight and losing weight. And it was actually one of the lecturers at college who was like, we're going to stop you dancing. We're going to have to stop you dancing because you're not well. And it was that moment that was like oh, wow. And then they actually asked me to stand up in front of my entire year and say why I wasn't allowed to dance. And I just, that moment, I remember just being, I couldn't speak because I was just crying. I was like, I'm so embarrassed. I was so ashamed. The feeling of like guilt and shame was so strong, because I'd done it to myself, but I didn't know
why,
how and why really. So it was that was a huge moment where I was like, okay, I need help with this. I know I need help, and that's when
like
I got therapy.
That's like the I'm an alcoholic thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to reach a point where...
Was it a healthy thing for him to do? Do you think it was the right thing?
Good question. I don't necessarily... Stopping me dancing, yes.
Yeah.
Making me stand up in front of the class, probably not. I don't think that was necessary.
Traumatic, to be honest.
It was quite traumatic at the time, and I remember just feeling so ashamed.
Yeah.
And I know they probably did that to help other people see that this is not, you can't do this. This is not the way to be healthy and to, to work as a dancer. But it did feel a bit like, I'm being made a spectacle of because of what I've been through.
Humiliated.
Yeah. And I don't think they ever meant to do that, but it's just the way it kind of happened. But yeah, it was a big catalyst in making me have to get help, essentially. And then seeing, my parents, because it's like you become so deluded.
Yeah.
I kind of knew I was tiny. I knew I was, but there was a part of me that still loved that.
Yeah.
Until I saw how it was affecting other people. So, at Christmas one year, I remember getting some clothes and them just hanging off me. And on Christmas Day, my mum going into the utility room and just crying. And I walked in and she was crying, and I knew why it was. And I was just like, I don't know how to deal with this, because I don't want to make you sad. I don't want to make you upset, but I don't know how to get out of this situation.
It must be awful for everyone involved.
Yeah, so challenging for a parent to...
Did she think you were going to do some serious damage?
Probably, yeah. And, they were so supportive. They got me help and paid for a lot of support for me.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that, they were able to, because I know a lot of people can't do that. And it did help tremendously. It really made a big difference in my life. But it's still something I have to be mindful of. It's still, I know I've got that addictive personality, and there's still those things that I have to work on a daily basis.
Well, you're recovering. You said it earlier. You said I'm a control freak. Well, recovering.
Yeah, exactly.
But actually you are a recovering addict.
Yeah.
That's essentially what it is. And it's, if we categorised food issues as addictions properly and in a way that wasn't, again, it's not to shame anyone, but I've got an addictive personality for sure.
Yeah.
The fight-flight response, everyone knows my story that listens to this, but if your fight-flight response kicks in early on, and I'm sure it must have been the case with seeing your mum go through so much, that watching her trauma of not being seen and heard, as a young girl watching a woman not being seen and heard in a society at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, 30 years ago, really? Is that right? Am I right with
so
that?
I'm 42, so
right.
just over.
That's about 30 years ago. The society was very different towards women's health then.
Yeah.
Even now, we're only just learning about heart issues with women as a result of no research being put into women's health.
This is it. And menopause just wasn't spoken about.
No.
It's like, puberty, menopause, anything to do with hormones was like a taboo subject.
It was.
Whereas now, finally people feel like they can talk about it.
Yeah.
But for years it's been that, you just don't mention those things.
No.
It's like,
she was 32.
Yeah.
So it would have been incredibly traumatic from the point of view of, again, there's no help. And you're watching that, and I would imagine that there's so many reasons why, you felt the way you did, and the addiction of, it's not food, it's the addiction of trying to feel that you've got control over something.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's so sad, really, isn't it? That knock-on effect of your mum not being seen and heard probably contributed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not her, but the system.
Yeah, absolutely. But then flipping it on its head, I truly believe that we go through everything for a reason, and everything that I've been through has enabled me to make a bigger impact than I ever would have done
Yeah.
if I hadn't have been through those
Well,
experiences.
this is what this is all about, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's okay that stuff did happen and I did go through a lot. My mum went through a lot, but here I am now creating the protected bubble for these women that are struggling with stress.
Absolutely. And that's what I always try and, get across to my clients is whatever you're going through for a reason. It's there to teach you something if you're willing to learn the lesson, and it's going to help you come out the other side and be able to do so much more in this world and impact people in a way if you want to. That's what it's there for. We can use these experiences to change the world, which sounds dramatic, but it's very true.
No, but it is, because it's one drop at a time, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're a drop in a large ocean, it all contributes.
Yeah.
And of course, it's always, I think I always talk about paying for power and all of this stuff. And it's also okay if you don't want to use anything.
Yeah.
You just want to learn and be in your own little bubble and do your own thing.
Yeah.
But if you do want to go out there and make a bigger impact, it's usually because you've seen someone not have the support they need, isn't it? Or you've been that person yourself.
Yeah. And most people who I'm inspired by are the people who have been through probably the most challenging times and come out the other side and used it, like you said, as used their pain in a way of creating purpose.
Yeah. And it gives you a sense of reason to be here as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because sometimes, and I know you've had this experience yourself, which we'll move on to, sometimes you do lose that sense of why am I here? What's the point?
Yeah.
If I can't feel the way I want to feel.
Yeah, then why?
So I know you went through some of this yourself.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women do when they go through menopause, because they are changing, their bodies are shifting, their hormones are shifting, and it can have a dramatic impact on your brain and how your body functions. So those perimenopausal years can leave a lot of women feeling like, what's the point? Why am I here? I was this lively, bubbly human, and now I've turned into this person that I don't even like anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a really challenging time, and I think it's important to remember that it won't last forever.
Yes.
But you do need to support your body in a different way. You need to give your body different things than what you gave it in its 20s.
Yeah.
It's much more robust then. It's different. And it doesn't mean that you can't live in the healthiest, happiest body that you feel confident in your 40s and beyond, but you can't do what you did in your 20s. It's got to change. You've got to look after the systems of your body much, much more, because they're being affected by your hormones. So I went through a kind of 3-year health, what shall I call it? Challenge, debacle, confusion, everything under the sun, where my immune system basically went into overdrive. And I truly believe that was from the years previous to that.
So the eating disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing that we often forget as well, particularly with menopause, is we blame our hormones for everything, but we forget to look at how we were treating our bodies in the lead up to that experience.
Yes.
It makes such a dramatic impact. We have to think previous to going into perimenopause about our bodies enough to be able to bolster them, to make sure we're in a good place, that we're managing stress well, that we're looking after our gut, that we're doing all the right things to support the body, so that when it reaches that point when things are shifting, it's able to adapt better.
That's such a good point, because we do. I told you earlier, I went straight to the doctors. They didn't listen. Went straight to a private health clinic, got all the hormones, and the impact of that was I put weight on, swollen ankles. I felt dreadful. I felt suicidal, and I'd felt suicidal in my. I'm prone to that. Yeah. Similarly, to a lot of women, but I'd already gone to that place early on, so it was an easy place for me to go to. Yeah. I was walking. I remember walking the dog, and it was my safe space, because it was by the river and it was beautiful, and I could always feel when I was around water. Yeah. And one day I was walking, and I just thought, I feel nothing. If I can't feel this moment, then what am I here for? Like, this is the most simple, basic stuff, and I can't tap into it anymore. Yeah. So go to the clinic, get all these hormones, think it's going to solve everything. And exactly what you've just said, I'm so glad you've said that bit. I hadn't taken into account what I needed to look at. Yeah. You can't just put a plaster on these things.
No, and this is the problem, I think, with the kind of world we live in at the moment. I'm a massive fan of hormone replacement therapy. I really am. I think it can be a game changer for so many women when it's done in the right way at the right time. Yeah. But what we need to think of is, how are we supporting the systems of the body before we put hormones in? Yeah. Because if you're not detoxing those hormones properly, if your liver's sluggish, if your gut health's a mess and you're not detoxing those hormones properly and metabolizing them, if you just then go and put hormones into an inflamed body that's not working very well, it will just make it worse.
Yeah, it's exactly what happens. Yeah.
So we need to do the things first and then see, okay, what's left over? Because again, a lot of the symptoms that women experience are coming from their gut health.
Yeah.
They're coming from their toxic load being too high, their stress levels being too high, their cortisol being dysregulated. So it's like, well, let's fix those first and then see what's left over. And if we need the hormones, then great, we'll put them in because the body's receptive to them. But if we haven't done the things leading up to it, then we're just not going to get the results that we want.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's a lot of people on social media now, some really high profile people, and you see these social media clips going, fast, do this, do that, and it's like, great. But what I want from you today is the context to all of that, because and obviously this podcast will be made into shorts, and it will be one of those shorts that people will see and hopefully being, curious about. But tell me, because you speak about this overactive immune system thing, which led you to understand about all the things you've just mentioned there about getting the system right first before the hormones. So let's hear a bit about that and then hear more about what we can do.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I went into a place of having a really overactive immune system for 3 years. So basically I'd been competing and people often think, oh, it was the competing that tipped you over the edge. And I'm like, actually, competing was the opposite for me. It was the thing that actually encouraged me to eat more food and nourish my body more than I ever had done in my life, because naturally I'm someone who will always trend towards under eating, and competing forced me to eat more food and actually have the courage to eat more food and realize that I wasn't going to go back to that place that I went to before where I suddenly ballooned. So it actually was the complete opposite. But I'd been competing and I was going into an off season and I was turning 40. So I was like, going to have a year of freedom, what I thought was freedom, which is for me is just not freedom at all, which was, kind of be a bit slacker on my diet, change my training up, train how I want a little bit more. But what I did was kind of the opposite and just ended up under eating, pushing my body too far with too much like high intensity training and things like that. And my body just had a bit of a meltdown. I then got the fabulous COVID, and that was the final little piece to the puzzle that tipped my body over the edge. And my immune system just went into a state of complete overdrive. But it was like no one really understood what was going on. I worked with multiple different practitioners. I did so many different protocols. I literally did every test you can possibly think of. I was like, I'm going to find the root cause of this because I know there's a root. And I was like, I've got mold toxicity, I've got this, I've got that. I'd got everything basically. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, surely it can't be all of these things.
How did you do like a test to find out?
I did lots of tests, yeah. Spent a fortune on all of the testing you could possibly think of. I've probably done it about 5 times.
Is that because you were so anxious
I was
about
just,
it?
I was like, I can't live like this. I just knew there was something that wasn't right. But blood tests and everything, I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm deficient in everything, but I'm eating the best quality diet. Like, how is this possible? Why is my gut not functioning? All these things. And it's because my nervous system was so dysregulated.
Yeah.
There was so much inflammation because my immune system was just so triggered that my body wasn't absorbing anything and nothing was working properly. But I'd worked with countless different practitioners. I'd done so many different things. And I just wasn't getting any better. And I was kind of that complex case where everyone was just like, all the things that should work are just not working. And I was like, I know, I've tried them all.
That must have been so desperate.
I was. And I got to this place of sheer desperation. And I wasn't a religious person, but I remember just praying. I was like, please just help me figure this out. Because as a nutritionist myself, surely I should be able to figure this out, but I can't. And again, that led to feelings of, inadequacy. I'd lost my whole identity because I was always known as the person who was really disciplined, who knew everything about health. And I was just like, I put on 10 kilos. I just didn't look like me. I didn't feel like myself. I was depressed. I was anxious, all these things that I'd never experienced. And I was just like, what is going on? And so I was physically like just praying for a miracle. And lo and behold, thanks to Instagram, I was presented with one. So I discovered a man called Vince Pitstick, and he'd worked with countless other women like myself, many of them who'd had previous eating disorders or were quite, driven type A personalities, who had then kind of primed their immune system to be in this state of, overactivity or on the cusp. And then something comes along, tips it over the edge, and that's it.
And COVID was the thing for you.
And COVID was the thing.
Because it did that to a lot of people, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's normally the people who were already in a stressed state. In some way, their body was slightly dysregulated, that it really tipped into that place. And that's why a lot of athletes
Yes.
who got COVID were really affected, because they were already pushing their bodies to the max.
To the limit, yeah.
And it's like their nervous system, their immune system is already primed at that point. And it's like that last little thing comes along.
And that's it, you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. So I basically binge watched everything he'd ever done. And I was like, oh my goodness. And he interviewed so many other women that were like me. And up until that point, I hadn't found anyone. I was like, I can't find anyone who's experienced what I'm going through. And then it was all these women. I was like, oh my goodness, that's me. And I remember Ben, my husband, just being like, he's the one that can fix you. Like,
wow.
He is the man that can fix you. And I was like, I truly believe he is. So I started working with him. And then, 6 months later, had transformed my body, transformed my health. I felt like myself again. Suddenly my personality was back, and all my friends were just like, it's just, I feel like you're here again. Whereas before it was like, you just weren't there. And I was like, I know, I wasn't there.
Wow.
There were periods where I would just walk along and just be like, I don't want to be here anymore, because I just wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It's amazing. And the reason I say that is because it's making me think of have you heard of Dr. Sana?
Yes.
So he's a pain specialist, and I think he must have been a chiropractor or something in America, and it was a similar thing where people were experiencing like undescribable pain. They were just constantly in chronic inflammation. Similar thing, nervous system dysregulation, undoubtedly, a lot of the time for these people. And he was just like, something else is going on. This isn't just mechanical. This isn't just physical. And he was doing a lot of sort of stuff around meditation and nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
Is your guy here the same kind of vibe?
In some ways, yes. So very much about like, you have to do the somatic work as well, because otherwise if you keep going back to doing what you were doing before, you're never going to fix the issue, because you can fix the body.
Yeah.
But if you don't fix the mindset and the nervous system, you'll keep going back to where you were.
Have you heard of an app called Sensei? Not app, it's a
Sensei. Yeah, I walked around with it on for like every day, all day. Literally, I lived in the thing.
Yeah. Because
stimulate the vagus nerve.
Yeah. Someone was talking to because it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
I actually found an app called Vibrator. And it's not for what you think it's for, although I'm sure it can be used. This
could turn into a very different podcast.
It's multi-purpose, but we'll save that for another one, like you say. But it basically does these patterns of vibration, and it's got some sounds that you can use with it. So for people that can't afford Sensei, because the Pebble is, I think, about 300 quid, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not quite as strong, this vibration.
No, but it's giving the same
you
vagus
stick it
nerve
on your
stimulation.
Chest.
Yeah.
And you listen to the sounds and follow the app and stuff. And one of my clients, she with Sensei, she was really, really badly abused as a child, and nothing was working. We worked together for a long time, and I say nothing was working, but she couldn't get to that point of system regulation. The somatic stuff, and I do the somatics with the sound bowls, the hypnotherapy, the EMDR, but also the physical somatic stuff, like the vibrations.
Absolutely. And I always say to people, it's like you've got to work on both together, because you can do all the physical aspects, but if you're not doing the mind, then you'll always go back to the same place. But also, if you've got an overactive immune system, it's tipping your body into a state of nervous system dysregulation, because the immune system is so ramped up and causing so much inflammation that then the body will stay in high alert no matter what you do. You can't get it out of that mode. And that was me. I was doing every somatic practice you can possibly think of. I'd got every device you could think of. I mean, it was hilarious. Our bedroom was like a flipping biohacking center. It's hilarious. I'd got everything. At nighttime I'd be wearing this thing called a brain tap, which does meditation, but it's got binaural beats, but then it shines lights in your eyes and in your ear canals to get your brain into theta states. Then I had my Sensei, and I was doing everything, and I was like, my adrenals are still a mess. What is going on? Like, why is my nervous system like this?
Yeah.
And I thought it was just my adrenals, but I was like, it can't be, because I'm doing everything that would make my adrenals work sufficiently, and they're not. It's not.
And
working.
Like you say, you've got the nutritional background, so you were doing the food side of it as well. Yeah. But there was more to it.
Exactly, and it was this overactive immune system that was just triggering this nervous system response 24/7, and then that was messing up my gut. So it's like I could do all the gut protocols, but then my immune system would trigger it to get back to where it was again.
Yeah.
So it's like you just go round in circles.
Yeah.
So I went through a really, extensive protocol, and it had to be very specific in the way that we did things to, yes, we had to do the gut work, and we had to flush my system and, get me detoxing properly. But then we had to bring my immune system back down, because it was just here. And if it stayed here, it would just keep triggering everything else to be off. So it's like, once we got the immune system to come back down, it was like, oh, my nervous system now was
How
calm
did you do
down.
it? I mean, you can't give too much away, I'm sure, because
No, we
it's-
did a lot of different kind of protocols. So I went through a whole process they call the 4F process. So one is called a flush, which opens up detox pathways, really nourishes the adrenals. Then I did a whole gut protocol. Then I did lots of different fasting protocols. And fasting was something that I'd always been really cautious around. Obviously, with an eating disorder, you have to be really, really mindful of things like that. And make sure that you're mentally able to do that. And it's not something that I recommend to people who aren't actively dealing with the mental and emotional components.
That's why you said you need all of it, you know. And I agree. As a psychotherapist, I'll never just say it's the mind that we need to look at. I'll always recommend other things that are, you have to.
Absolutely. And then I did diet variation. So, we'd be switching things up all the time, where I'd have some days or weeks that were low carb, other days when I'd have no protein.
Yeah.
Then I'd have high carb, and we were switching everything around. And by doing so, and getting my body into a state of autophagy, which is where your body basically can clear out unhealthy cells.
Wow.
That starts to bring down the inflammation and stop triggering the immune system.
Wow.
So once we did that, it was like my nervous system was just like, oh, wow, just calm.
Really?
And it was the most amazing feeling to suddenly feel like my body was safe again, because I kept saying to people, and no one could really understand it. I was like, I just don't feel safe in my body. Like, I don't feel like I'm safe.
You're constantly in survival mode.
Yeah. And that was it. It was like my body was in such survival mode, and because there was so much inflammation, because the immune system was so triggered, it wasn't safe because it thought there was danger.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. And as soon as the immune system started to regulate again, it was like, now my body feels safe.
So essentially, you like this protocol. It sounds quite complex, and you can't do it on your own.
No, absolutely not.
This is the thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
this is the thing.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I'm now training under Vince. I'm doing an apprenticeship with him, so I can learn all of this, because I want to be able to help other people. And I come across so many people who are where I was and have no idea what to do, and then they go to the doctors, they have all the blood tests, and they all come back normal.
Yeah,
because most of your immune system lives in your tissues.
Yeah.
So you can have a blood test done and it won't show up because it's in the tissues, not in the blood.
Wow.
So it's like people are walking around having no idea, but just not feeling good. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to help them change that and realize what feeling good actually is.
I mean, this is just, even that about the blood test, I didn't know it was in the tissues.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same with hormones. You can have perfect looking hormones on a blood test, but it's about how responsive your cells are to the hormones, because on our cells, we have receptor sites for hormones. And so those hormones have to be able to dock onto the receptor site for that to take an action. So you could have all the hormones running around in the bloodstream, but if they're not docking on properly, then the cells aren't actually getting the responses or the messages to do what they need to do. So it's actually not having the effect. And that's why you can put a woman on HRT and it not have the effect that she wants, because it's not docking on. The cells aren't sensitive to it. So we need to make sure that the cells are receptive to those hormones before we put the hormones in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this work that he's doing is like you said earlier, it's he's creating a movement by the sounds of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And he's definitely someone who's paved the way and gone first, and gone through a lot of adversity with it. People not believing what he said, and but that's how anything profound happens.
Yes, you're right.
It's questioned by everyone first.
Well, you said he'd had his own history with lots of addictions, and it sounds like he's had to be curious to find himself, and now he's found. Well, actually, I've got a client. His name's John, and he's one of those people. He had kidney disease. I think it was grade 3 or 4, and he basically went on this journey and healed himself because he's got such an interest in, all anything medically. He's not a doctor, but he should have been.
Yeah.
And he's gone down this road, and even the consultant just could not believe what he'd been able to do.
Yeah.
And there are people out there, and I mean, you've got to really. I guess know your stuff in the first place. Like you were already in a place where you knew stuff.
Yeah, but I also think it gives you can either do two things. Like you can either go, well, this is it, and just accept it as your story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that. They accept this is my story. I'm ill, and that becomes their story.
Yeah, it's who they are then.
Yeah. Or you can choose to not accept it and go, this is not how I choose to live my life, and I will not accept it. And I will do everything within my power to change it. And I will be hungry to learn in order to be able to make the changes that I need to make.
Why do you think you had that ability?
I think because I knew that I know how miraculous the body is. And I know that it it wants to be healthy. And so I was just like, I know what healthy feels like. And I refuse to accept that this is my now norm. I refuse, because I've not felt like this before. I know what feeling good feels like. I'm doing all the right things. So there's something that's stopping it, and I will do whatever I need to do, and I will dig until I find that thing. And I just wasn't prepared to accept it. And I would just encourage anyone listening to this, if you are going through anything, to be that person that just doesn't accept that that's your norm, because it doesn't need to be, but you do need to be willing to dig and to find and to research and find the people and the resources that can help you.
And also, we mentioned earlier about your lovely mother.
Yes.
Who had her own journey of not being heard, not being seen. I've said that a few times. And she did exactly that too, didn't she?
Yeah, she was not willing to settle.
Yeah. And so you've definitely, where your feeling out of control may have come from, seeing her treated that way. And that's where we come full circle with you wanting to help women to not have to go through what your mum went through. But when you went through your own battles and your immune system wasn't working properly and you were feeling so dysregulated, you'd obviously learnt from your mother that you just keep going until you find the answer. And that is essentially the gift of being the role model that keeps going. And that's why I say, actually, and you've said this yourself during this podcast, although that would have been horrific for her in so many ways to feel the way she felt, she was being a role model. She didn't even know it.
Exactly.
She was just doing what she had to do.
Yeah.
And here you are talking about this so openly, so vulnerably, because it is a vulnerable thing to talk about. And somebody somewhere will listen and go, yeah, like, I really don't want to be like this. I don't know any other way, but perhaps there is something.
Yeah.
And they'll find you.
Exactly. And there is always a solution.
Yeah.
There is always a solution. That's what I truly believe.
Yeah.
The body wants to be healthy, but there's something that's throwing it off, and you just need to be prepared to dig in and trust that, you know, it might not be a very quick journey. It might take time. It might take a lot of learning and, you know, different things, but if you trust the process, you will get there.
And does Vince work with men as well? He does.
Yeah, he does. He works with a lot of, obviously that he works with a lot of women because we are naturally primed to have stronger. We are actually the superior race.
Obviously.
We obviously know that. But we naturally have heightened immune systems for the fact that we are the ones that carry children.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to fight off anything, but it does mean that our immune systems are more primed to going into that state of overactivity, which is why you see that autoimmunity happens to way more women than it does men.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, they haven't done a lot of clinical testing around women at all, so we're only finding out, you know, more about this stuff now.
Absolutely. There's an amazing woman called Dr. Stacey Sims as well, and she always says women are not little men. Yeah. And it's so true. And every bit of research is done on men and then just applied to women. And it's like, we're not men. Yeah. We're so much more complex.
Yeah, we need more research. I know it's starting to happen, but it's still a long way off.
Absolutely.
Hence the reason having conversations with people like you that have gone on the journey, that have that background of understanding, but have also met people that have got more understanding or more knowledge. Yeah. And then wanting to learn through them and continue this process. It's needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a never-ending journey.
Yeah.
You know, the body is so complex. There's just always another layer to learn about and to figure out, which is why I love it. It's fascinating because the more you learn, the more you want to learn. You're just like, oh my God, this thing that we live in is unbelievable.
Yeah, I find it. I say my obsession is the brain, but, you know, how the brain links to the body, you need to understand the whole system.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's profoundly interesting and, well, it is a life source to understand yourself.
Yeah, it really is.
Isn't it? Because you can feed, like you say, you can feed your body, you can move your body, you can do all of that. But if you don't understand the inner workings...
Yeah, and the way that you tick as well, like knowing yourself enough, which takes years of, self-discovery.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you end up back where you were. Like for me, I know, I have to be really mindful about making sure I eat enough and, feeling safe around that. Yeah. If I don't, I'll go back to my default mode, my tendencies, which are just don't eat enough. Yeah. So it's like knowing yourself enough to know, and, certain things that might trigger me where someone's like, oh God, you eat a lot. Before that would have triggered me. And I'd be like, well, I should be eating less. And I'm like, no, I know my body enough now to know what my body needs. Yeah. And if that's what you think is more than what you're eating, then that's all good because that's what my body needs.
Yeah, it's very different for everyone, like you say.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question is, although what you do on your retreats is going to be over a period of days and it's going to be intense, but in a beautiful way, obviously. Yeah. What do you think If you could give one bit of that's a really rubbish question, but we'll go with it anyway. If you could give one bit of advice to start, so, someone who maybe would love to go on a retreat but isn't ready just yet, what's a good place to start if you just feel, you mentioned choice there, if you just feel kind of like, I don't have the energy to even make that choice, where's a good place to start for self-discovery?
Oh, God, that's a question.
I know, I told you it wasn't a very good one.
I'm trying to think. Ooh.
It's too big, maybe.
I mean, self-awareness is the biggest thing I think that makes people make change, because if you're not aware of things, you can't change.
But you have to have compassion for self first, don't you? You have to be like compassionate enough towards yourself.
Yeah.
To even begin that awareness.
Yeah. Yeah. Because otherwise we just judge ourselves. So self-compassion and being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say to any woman, listen, try and start to become aware of the voice in your head and what it's telling you about yourself.
Yes.
Because I was so unaware for so many years of my life. Like, if I look back as a dancer, I was horrible to myself. I'd walk in already defeated, saying I was crap, I was never going to get the job, they were better than me, I was stupid, all those things. And I was so unaware of that voice.
Yeah.
Didn't even hear it.
Yeah.
And then it was like all of a sudden I started to become aware, and I was like, wow.
Maybe it's awareness first. Awareness leads to either judgment. That's chicken and egg, isn't it?
Yeah.
Either way. Sorry to interrupt there. I just thought maybe I should say that, because if you're not aware of that inner voice, and it is hard to tune into, but I think that's where those little tools then.
Yeah, the tools and being still.
Yeah.
Because I think what we do is we busy ourselves so much, sometimes to avoid listening to those voices. So it's like, if I can just be busy all the time, I don't have to think, I don't have to listen to what my brain is telling me, I can just keep myself busy.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, and this is why people struggle with meditation, because it forces them to sit still, and then it's like, my brain is just busy, and it's like, yeah, because it's never had chance to stop
down,
and it's like, when you do allow it to slow down, that's when you can start to become aware of those voices in there and what they're saying. And it's like, when I started to do that, and I was like, wow, I'm horrible to myself. Like, the way I speak to myself sometimes, I wouldn't speak to anyone like that, so why do I speak to myself like that? And it was that first step in being able to hear that and go, okay, why am I like that? Why am I so self-depreciating? Why do I say those things about myself? And that led me to be inquisitive. And that inquisition was the kind of next step, I guess, in thinking, okay, well, maybe I could just be a bit kinder. Maybe I could just be a bit more compassionate with myself, and realize that I speak to myself that way because I think this, but why do I think that?
That's in, I think it is self-awareness then compassion. Just listening to you say that, rather than self-compassion then self-awareness. But maybe you've got to be kind to yourself in the first place.
To give yourself the time to stop. Yeah. So it's a bit of both, really, because it's like, otherwise, if you haven't got that compassion, you'll never sit down for long enough. Yeah,
you'll never think, actually, I deserve to understand what my brain is doing.
Yeah.
But either way, I was just trying to be specific about that, because I know some people are like, okay, so actually, where do I start?
Yeah.
Because I've confused it by interrupting. But, I think it's really important to be curious to that point sometimes. Like, where do I start? Now, the problem is with self-compassion and self-awareness is that if you're on autopilot, which so many people are, and they're not really, and again, you mentioned avoidance, these things might come up on their Instagram or TikTok, but they don't, it's like, oh, well, I haven't got time to deal with that.
Yeah.
So I think the first bit is you mentioned something earlier about your miracle morning?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about this, because for someone who's like, I haven't got time, I haven't even got time to sit and reflect.
Yeah.
Tell me what you do.
So my miracle morning, we've got big red light panels in our house.
For the infrared?
Yeah, infrared red light panels. Purely because obviously we don't get much sunlight in the UK, so it's like I've got to make my own sunlight.
Yes.
So I sit in front of those and I will do breath work. Again, it's one of those things that people are like, where do you even start with that? I've got an amazing app called Othership that I use, and the reason I love it so much, it's got so many different variations, but it's got ones that are literally 3 minutes. So for that person that is, I don't have time.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, just go and do that for 3 minutes. You can sit on the toilet for 3 minutes. You can scroll on Instagram for 3 minutes. Give that 3 minutes to you instead of someone else, just for today. Just start with that, and then maybe 1 minute where you're just going to sit afterwards in silence, or with, an audio on, that just helps you start to take that time for you. And actually Lisa did a really good meditation when we were on the retreat, which was just 7 minutes. And again, so many women at the retreat were like, I just never make that time for myself.
Yeah.
You know, I always think of meditation and think, oh, I've got to sit there for 20 minutes. And she was like, no, just do this 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And they did it, and they were like, that went so quickly. And she was like, well, could you do that for yourself every morning? And they were like, yeah, I could. 7 minutes, you know, that's all it takes to start the process. So could you just do a 3-minute breath work and a 5-minute meditation, and you can use a guided one from YouTube to start you off.
Yeah, it's so simple, isn't it? It's all there.
It's all there. It's just 8 minutes of your life.
Yeah.
And we can all find 8 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just being willing to.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
I love what you've just said. You've just made it everything that people go, yeah, but where do I start? Yeah, but how do I do it? And obviously when people come and see me, I give them those little tips, and they're getting a much more than just the breath work. They're getting that time to really have someone be curious with them, which is what you're offering in your space, and giving the tools and all of that. But this is remember, this is the starting point.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it makes people then go, oh, actually I can do that.
Yeah.
And I am hearing something in my head that's probably not very pleasant. And I do want to be more successful, and I do want to be a better wife or a better mother and a better colleague, and I do want to be a better friend, and I do want to feel better towards myself. So if this lady here has gone through all of that and she's doing these things in the morning, then why not give it a go?
Yeah.
Like, what have you got to lose other than 8 minutes?
Absolutely. And that's what I always think. I look at people who are where I would like to be in my life, and I'm like, well,
what
action
have they done?
steps do they take?
Yes.
You know, role models that I can go, okay, well, yeah, they're doing that. So there's obviously something in it that I can take and turn it into my version of that.
Yes.
There's actually an amazing book called The Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod.
That's right, I've seen that one.
Such a great book. And I had the pleasure of introducing him on stage one day as well. And he is just the most incredible human. And again, his story is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But that book was one of the, the things for me that was like, right, I need to take that time in the morning. And I don't necessarily have to do the full steps that he talks about, but what are the things that make me feel good? And it will be different for everyone. I'm a massive fan of meditation, breath work, and prayer. They're my kind of 3 must-dos. But then it's like, other people will do a gratitude list. Other people will do different things that work for them. And I think it is finding the things that make you feel good, because otherwise it becomes a tick box exercise where it's like, I must do this and I've done that. And it's like, well, no, did that actually do anything for you? And I know sometimes to begin with, with meditation, for example, it doesn't always feel like it, because you have to get into it. You have to, it's a practice.
It is a practice.
So you have to give it long enough.
Yeah.
But then it is about adapting everything to being the thing that works for you. So like sometimes in the morning I'm like, do you know what, I'm just going to put on music. And I'm just going to sing and dance like an idiot, because that's what raises my energy and makes me feel good.
Yes.
So it's like finding the things that make you feel good.
Yeah, I love this. So far we've mentioned Othership, the app.
Yeah.
We've also mentioned Vibrator,
Yep.
the app, which actually you could do at the same time. If you're doing breath work, you can actually hold the Vibrator app on your chest or around the neck area and just do your breath work. Or you could do your breath work first. Then you listen to your little tunes, and then you do a little minute or 2 with your vibrator. So these are really easy. I mean, you'd have to stop and start, but again, you'd build up a practice that then becomes your own.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like, new things always feel hard to begin with.
Yeah.
Because they're new.
Yeah.
But once they become a habit, and I always talk about habit stacking with my clients, like form one good habit first. Yeah. Once you've nailed that, then stack another one onto it.
Yes.
And what we try and do is we try and do everything in one go.
Yeah.
So even if you just start with 3 minutes of breath work or a 5-minute meditation, just do that until you've nailed it.
Yeah.
And then add something on and just keep doing that.
It actually makes you want to do it more. Like I said this to someone about affirmations in the morning. Have your little post-it note on the mirror whilst you're brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
And just in your head repeat it over and over. But only do that. I don't want you to do anything else. And of course, when they came back, they'd done more because I'd given them permission to just do this one thing.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, actually, I could probably do another minute of something else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with diet.
Yeah.
I think you have those kind of 2 camps of people. You've got the people who you'll give them something and they're all in and they'll do everything. And then you've got the other people, if you give that to them, they're not going to do anything.
They'll rebel.
Yeah, overwhelmed, can't do any of it. And it's like, well, if you're that person, just do one thing.
Yeah.
What one change could you make to begin with? Nail that, then add something else on.
Yeah. That's so important to hear. And it's what you were saying earlier about how you eat and everybody's different. So we're all different in the way we operate, because we've all got different fears. We've all got different obstacles in the way. We've all got different belief systems. We all run very differently to each other. But some of the stuff that you're talking about would work
Yeah.
brilliantly just in terms of getting you started.
Absolutely. And I always say that with nutrition as well. Like, you know, different people need different things because it depends on how much you exercise, how much muscle mass you have, how your nervous system is
Yeah.
regulated. So your body needs different things, but there are fundamental principles that pretty much work for everyone,
Yeah.
or that should be the basis of health for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, so far, this has just been so useful, and I feel like I know a lot already. And this is why we should never, and you said this yourself, I think you said it earlier before we recorded, you can never feel like you know everything, because there's
No.
always someone that's got something that you haven't.
Yeah, never-ending students.
Yeah, and we're all attracted, like I think I am, you are, but I think we're all attracted to the people that are doing something that we'd love to do, but we just don't know how to get there. And,
Yeah.
you know, you've turned your life into a whole big, well, it's a school really, isn't it? What you do is just a school, but it's very specific.
Yeah.
So briefly then, I suppose as a way of bringing it to a close, but really bringing in some really useful points for people. I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I really noticed about you was the microbiome conversation, the menopause conversation, but the holistic point of view.
Yeah.
For those that hear about gut all of the time, but don't really understand microbiome and don't really understand the ins and outs of it, what can they do and what does it mean?
Okay, so I love to give analogies because I think it helps people see. I'm quite a visual person.
Yeah.
So if you think of your gut like a garden, so in a beautiful garden you have lots of different types of flowers, all different species of flowers, and that's what makes the garden really pretty. And you might have a few weeds that just lurk around the edge, which is fine. We can kind of live with the weeds as long as they're not running over the entire garden. Our gut is very similar to that. So our microbiome is the equivalent of all of these beautiful different flowers, all these different species of bacteria, which are vital for our overall health. They, you know, help us regulate our blood sugar. They help us detox estrogen, which going through menopause is vital.
Yes. Yeah.
They help us by producing vitamins and minerals for us. They break down foods. They do so many different things, and we need to take care of them. But what happens with modern day living for most people is they're tending to the weeds and they're not tending to the flowers. So the weeds are like the bad bacteria or the kind of pathogenic bacteria that can take over if we allow them to. So we need to be really mindful about that balance of looking after the good bacteria, the flowers, and not tending to the weeds and letting them run rampant in the garden. And unfortunately, modern day living isn't conducive for that. You know, a lot of the things that we do in modern day living don't support the gut microbiome. So we need to eat in a way that really supports the microbiome, particularly when it comes to hormones, because when we do go through that transition in perimenopause, that shift in hormones actually shifts our microbiome to being less healthy and less diverse.
Right. So but you don't have to change anything. It would naturally just shift it.
Exactly. So that's why we need to be more mindful about taking better care.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean our gut can't be as healthy as it was, but we just need to be more mindful about putting the right things in. And
We've got to become the gardener.
Exactly. Really good gardener. I don't know why I use that analogy because I'm a terrible gardener. I've got astroturf because I can't look after a plant.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, we just need to be a better gardener, essentially. Look after it in a better way. Be more mindful about the things we're putting in, making sure we're not eating loads of inflammatory foods.
Yes.
Eat real whole food. Get your fibre in, phytonutrients, the things that feed the good bacteria, and reduce or remove the things that are going to cause more damage.
So what sort of foods would you say? I mean, I know things like your oats and your salmon and all your oily bits and bobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the gut microbiome, things that your gut microbiome loves, fibre is one of them. Now, if you're someone that listens to that and goes, oh my God, as soon as I eat fibre, I bloat like a balloon, that's a sign that your bacteria is out of balance.
Because it shouldn't do that.
No, your body loves fibre. Your gut bacteria love fibre, and it's also super important for detoxing.
Yeah.
So that means that you need some real work, and that's more specific in terms of, like, I would run you through a gut protocol to reduce or remove some of the bacteria that are in there because you've probably got too many. Polyphenols, so really rich in things like berries and colourful veggies. So if you think Mediterranean style diet, that's my favourite as a baseline for most people.
Yes.
All of those polyphenols feed certain bacteria within the gut that produce something called short-chain fatty acids.
Yes.
Short-chain fatty acids are really important for reducing inflammation. Again, when we go through menopause, we're much more prone to inflammation because that loss of estrogen causes a more inflammatory response in the body. They also protect the gut lining, which is so unbelievably important because most of our immune system is located in the gut lining for good reason. It's the entry point to the outside world. So our body is again, being very clever, is like, well, I'm going to have most of the immune system located there. So if anything comes through the gut lining that shouldn't, I can form an attack against it.
Yes.
But the problem with that is, if we've got gaps in our gut lining through stress, that can happen through it, through eating the wrong types of foods and inflammation, not having enough short chain fatty acids to protect the gut lining, then undigested proteins can escape through anything going on in the gut, any kind of endotoxins going on in the gut can escape through the gut lining, stimulate the immune system. Immune system gets triggered. That can lead to things like autoimmunity. It can lead to an overactive immune system, which causes a lot of inflammation in the body.
Yeah.
The immune system is doing what it's naturally meant to do, which is cause inflammation.
Yes.
It's there because inflammation heals.
Yes.
It brings blood cells, etc., to a point that's damaged to help heal it.
Yeah.
But if you've got this chronic inflammation going on because the immune system is chronically triggered, then you're having all of this inflammation happening, and that leads to disease.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what would you avoid eating?
So things that I would be mindful about reducing are things like gluten.
Yeah.
And that's not to say don't ever eat a piece of bread or gluten again, but be mindful about how much you're eating,
Yeah.
the quality you're eating as well. So if you're going to eat gluten, eat the best quality gluten that you can, and in moderation. If you do have anything going on digestively or immune system, though, I would remove it for a period of time.
Right.
With most of my clients, what I'll do is I'll put them on a short elimination diet to remove the most common problematic foods, to get things back in balance, to make sure their gut lining is nice and healthy. And then once we've got their body into a state of regulation, we can add it back in. Dairy for some people, again, can be one of those foods. Not for everyone, but a lot of people do find it quite problematic, again, because they just aren't digesting it particularly well. And again, quality. Corn can be one for people as well.
Yeah.
Refined carbohydrates, processed and packaged foods.
Yeah.
It's really about going back to how we used to eat. If
The
you think,
basics.
yeah, it is. Eat real whole foods as much as possible, as much colour on your plate as you physically can, good quality protein sources. And what I often see is that women just don't eat enough protein.
Yeah,
and it's
so
vital.
true.
It's vital. And I speak to a lot of women and I'm like, tell me exactly what you're eating for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And they're like, I'm eating a high protein diet. And I'm like, okay, tell me exactly what you're eating. And I'm like, you are not eating a high protein diet at all.
What do they think is high protein?
Well, they'll be like, I've had a chicken breast for lunch and I've had a protein shake. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's probably about 50 grams.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then you're basically probably overeating on carbohydrates. And again, it's not anti-carb at all. I'm a big fan of carbohydrates. They can be really important for the thyroid and for the adrenals.
But it's your simple ones you want, isn't it?
We want the complex.
Not complex, sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, everyone. Complex.
Complex, absolutely. There are times for simple carbohydrates before a training session. If you're building muscle, then that can be helpful.
Yeah.
But other than that, we want more complex and we want to balance them in the best way so we're not getting spikes in our blood sugar.
For those that don't know, and I do know, I just used the wrong word. The complex ones are your sort of veggies and...
Yeah, veggies, sweet potatoes, root vegetables, quinoa, things like that. Legumes can be classed as a bit of a complex carb as well.
Do you know what I love? I was saying this to someone the other day. I love quinoa for breakfast. Have you ever done it
it's
for
great.
breakfast?
Yeah.
And sweet potato for breakfast. Have you done that for breakfast?
Yeah.
These are the things that... people might not have tried before. Why would you do quinoa for breakfast? But you put that with some yogurt. I use dairy, full-fat dairy yogurt and berries and, nuts and seeds and stuff. It's really lovely.
Absolutely. It's just knowing how to
do it.
That's it. And I always say, magic really happens when you learn how to make the foods that you love out of better ingredients.
Yes.
So if you can learn how to make, and this is what we did a lot of on the retreat, is, people were like, oh, I really want some chocolate. And I'm like, that's great. Here's some chocolate. I'll make some for you.
Yeah.
So we made them chocolates. And the chef that came in did some immense food that was really correlated to the systems of the body. So we had a different focus every day. So one day was hormone health, one was gut and brain health. And then what we did was within the meals, we had certain foods that would help that system. So for example, when it was brain health day and gut health day, we had loads of fermented food. So they got the prebiotics and probiotics in. We had oily fish. We had certain nuts and seeds and different things within there that support those systems.
Yeah. And do you know what? People think some of these foods, if they're used to things like your ready meals and, McDonald's and all of that kind of stuff, they might think, but it's not very interesting. It's not.
Yeah.
It really isn't. You've just got to know how.
This is it. It's like if you do anything, of course, if you're going to sit there and have a plain chicken breast, some rice,
it is
and a
boring.
bit of broccoli, it's beige.
Yeah.
So beige.
Yeah.
You just need to add things to it. And so, herbs and spices, garlic, flavours, get flavour in there and you can make anything taste great.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's also about, you don't have to, just because you've seen a recipe, you don't have to have it exactly as the recipe says. You can change things up.
This is it.
I
mean, people often look at my food and they're like, wow, you must spend hours in the kitchen. I'm like, I really don't. No. I'm the queen of taking foods and I stick loads of herbs and spices on everything. I'll whack it in a pan and I'm done, or in an air fryer, and I'm done.
Air fryers are brilliant.
They're amazing. They are amazing. It doesn't have to take hours of your life. It's just about knowing how to create the balance within the meals. So making sure you've got. I always kind of say as a baseline for most people to start with, if you just think half of your plate as veg, different coloured veg, and how many different varieties of veggies can you get on your plate? You want as many plant points as you can get on a plate in a day. And plant points doesn't just mean veggies. It's like your herbs and spices.
Yeah.
They all count as well. They've all got different nutrients and polyphenols in. So how many different ones are you getting? So have half a plate filled with different coloured veggies. Make sure you've got greens in there. Great for your liver. Quarter of your plate is your protein, and then the other part of your plate would be your complex carbs and your fats.
Yeah.
Your healthy fats.
Keep it quite simple. See, that's so simple.
Yeah.
But I suppose if people want to know more, you've got your retreats, but do you do online webinars and stuff like that?
I do webinars. I do one-to-one consultations as well. So I run a 4-week group program, which is really about nailing the fundamentals. So with that one, people get lifetime access to an app. I co-created it with 2 doctors, a mindset coach and a personal trainer.
Wow.
So within the app, they literally have everything. We've got a whole educational course in there. We've got mindset support. We've got nervous system regulation, workouts, a hormones section. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
So for people who haven't yet nailed the fundamentals, that's my kind of go-to, because I'm like, I want you to, rather than you spending a lot of money working with me one-to-one, and I'm going to tell you the fundamentals, do this. It's much cheaper. Do the fundamentals, then come back to me if there's stuff that we need to work on. So I've got that. I do one-to-one coaching. So I've got like a 3 and a 6 month signature program, which I lead people through. And that is more really about digging into all of the systems.
Yes.
So we work on the liver, we then work on the gut, we then work on the immune system and hormones.
Yeah.
So we go through a real process together, which is very much what I went through as well myself. And then obviously the retreats, and then I do a lot of online free webinars, etc.
Yeah. There's, if they come and find you, what's your TikTok for a start?
Sarah Law UK.
And what's your Instagram?
Same. Sarah Law UK. Yeah.
So they're the
easy
two
to find.
main. They're the two main. And I think that there is a lot that you offer, and the fact that you've gone and done that app and really joined up with some good people and provided those fundamentals. I think if you've listened to this and just thought, wow, there's more I want to know, that is the place to go, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we created it, because we were like, we just want something where people have got everything they need, all the resources in one place, and it's accessible to most people because it's very cheap to join the program.
Yeah. What is it?
So to join, it's the starting price, I think, is £170 because it includes supplements.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then they get lifetime access to the whole app. So it's not like, after 30 days you're gone. It's like all the education, all the workouts, etc. are yours for life.
Wow. So that's powerful.
Yeah.
So again, it's worth having a look at your Instagram and TikTok, finding out where to get hold of all your apps and stuff.
Yeah.
Out of interest, what made you go into that space? Going into the apps and the retreats and everything?
So with the app, it was that I wanted something that was accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
I understand that, for some people financially to work with me on a one-to-one basis is too much and it's not where they're at right now. So I wanted something that meant that they weren't just left on their own, trying to figure things out and obviously being confused, because the internet is a wonderful thing and a curse all in one.
Yeah, it is. Right.
I love the fact that you can find anything that you want, but also there's so much noise that so many women come to me and they're like, I am so confused.
Yeah, it is
just
confusing.
Don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So I wanted somewhere that was a resource that meant that they could access what they needed to nail the fundamentals.
Yes.
Obviously, my 3 and 6 month programs are a lot more in depth in terms of we really work the systems.
Yeah.
And a lot of women need that. A lot of women do need to get in there and really make sure their liver's working well, make sure their gut is working well, and rebalance everything.
Yeah.
So that is a more kind of in-depth process.
Yeah.
But one that, I believe is beneficial for everyone, because what if we don't have our health? What do we have?
And it's only when you start to lose your health that you realise how important it is.
Absolutely.
And that's where you were.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the one thing I was like, I would do anything just to have my health back.
Yeah.
Like, you can take anything else away from me, but the health, without it, I can't do anything.
And I think that the core of this whole episode really is about understanding that you mentioned earlier, the hormone HRT is not always going to work unless you understand your system and do all the sort of detox flushing and all of that. But it's also a good metaphor for life.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we don't look at health as the most important thing, you could have all the money in the world, but you're never going to be able to enjoy it.
No, this is it, because I was in that place, everything else in my life was great. I've got an amazing husband. We had a beautiful villa that we were living in Ibiza, and
Wow.
I couldn't enjoy life because I
Wow.
felt terrible.
See, that's so many people's story.
Yeah.
But people don't want to talk about it because it sounds so privileged. I've got this, I've got that, I've got everything I want, but I'm not happy. And so many people don't understand, how can you have all of this and still not be happy? And often people are told you've got to just stop moaning, get on with it.
Yeah.
And actually,
it's like, but why are you not happy?
Yeah.
Is it that you're not fulfilled, or is it something health-wise that's stopping you from being happy?
And you can't just get on with it.
No.
I mean, you spent thousands trying to fix it before you found Vince.
I daren't even tell you how much I spent trying to get myself better, because I was like, I refused for this to be the end. I just refuse. So yeah.
Well, for me personally, I want to say thank you, because I think there's been some real takeaways. Obviously, people are going to come and find you if they want more, but also just to be vulnerable and share it all in such a vulnerable way, because I know that before we started talking, you were a bit like, oh, my mother, she did so well. I would hate for her to listen to this and feel like, she was responsible for something. But actually what she's been responsible for is this wave of work that you're doing and the education that you're offering to everybody else. And so without her experience, you really wouldn't be doing what you're doing, would you?
She's my hero.
Yeah. And I think we should all thank women that paved the way in their own little ways to become not even... I keep saying wrong. It's not even about that. It's about just be the drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
That's all you need to be.
Absolutely.
And it will make a difference somehow.
Yeah. And you never know what impact you're having on someone's life.
Yeah.
You really don't. That one thing that you do, that one thing that you say, that one social media post that you make that you don't think anything about could be the catalyst for someone else completely changing their life.
I couldn't agree more. And I know you travelled. It took 3 hours to get here to share all of that today. And I want to honestly thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on. I'm really grateful that you invited me on.
Well, I can't wait to share it with everybody else.
Thank you.
And honestly, I said to you before as well, I'd already signed up to your emails and everything. So I'd advise anyone to go to those. You said you do free webinars, do you occasionally?
Yeah, I do a lot. We do a monthly, it's called a Thrive Live, that we do every single month, which I do with the other creators of the programme that we created. And we always have a different theme. So we've done ones on stress management, body confidence, loads of different topics.
Anyone can come to that?
Yeah, anyone can join.
So as long as they go to your TikTok or to your Instagram, they can find that?
Yeah, exactly. Or I normally send out in my newsletters as well when one's coming up.
Great. So just sign up for them.
Yeah.
And then you can get access to all of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.